All right, guys. So let's get at it. It's me again, Miss Castillo. And we are going to talk today about the Gilded Age. And some of these topics, if you had watched the last video over westward expansion, are kind of going to talk on some of the things that we went over in westward expansion. And that's because everything in history is kind of tied to each other. Everything builds upon itself. There's causes and effects that can start, let's say, in westward expansion in the late 1800s and still affect us today in modern times. So it's why it's so important to understand where things came from and why we're dealing with them in the manner in which we're dealing with them today. So let's get into it. Gilded Age. These are the topics that I want you to consider as we go into Gilded Age and everything that ties into it together. Immigration, political machines, President Garfield, and the Pendleton Act, civil service reform, unions, starting with the Populist Party. As we get into the Progressive Era, we'll talk more about unions and the way that a lot of these things are going to be fixed or at least worked on. Technology is always a topic in every single unit, almost, and then monopolies. And these are the main things that we're going to be looking at with the Gilded Age. And you know what? I'm going to actually add one more on there. And I'm going to kind of tie it into immigration, and that is going to be women, children, and minorities. What is going on? This is specifically minorities here in the United States, not those who are choosing to immigrate in. So, but kind of tied together. We'll talk about these at the same time. So these are the major things that we're going to talk about in this unit. And let's get started because I don't want to take too much of your time. That way you have time to talk with your teachers afterwards. Okay. Oh, we got a beautiful map right now. And what I want to do is I want to talk about where our immigrants are coming from in a great illustration here, if I do say so myself. But I also want to talk about some other groups in here because remember we've got some other groups, and one of which is the minority groupings. And so I want to talk about African Americans. Where are they at during this time? And many of them are leaving the deep south down here, and they are moving up towards Kansas area and stuff like that to farm. They're taking their skills that they have acquired, and they are taking them to go farm in these areas over here where there's less discrimination. And of course, that right there is a pull factor. Remember, the pull factors are things that make us want to go somewhere, the things that make us happy. The push factors are things that make us unhappy, the things that make us want to leave a place. And so being able to go somewhere where you have more freedom to farm and do these things is a pull factor. And so they will be going to this central part of America. And this is one of the migratory patterns that would be taking place. And they will also be protected from things like Native American raids and stuff like that is by, here we go, the Buffalo Soldiers. And this is going to be a group of all African American ex-military men that will be protecting these migrants that are moving to go and farm elsewhere. And the reason that I bring them in is because the Buffalo Soldiers will come back into play when we're talking about Spanish-American War. When we're talking about that later, the Buffalo Soldiers will come into play with the Rough Riders. So good to kind of get them under your belt with regard to your understanding as far as who they are. But they are going to help those exodusters who are migrants. Okay, and we also talked about our migrants, the homesteaders. Remember those who are going to take advantage of the Homestead Act? Okay, they're coming from over here. They're going over this way, right? Homesteaders are going this way. And we also have those who are going for the gold rush. Those people are going to Alaska, okay? So these are the things that we've talked about. They're also going down here to California, but I don't want to write all over the map, but just as a review of kind of what we went over in that last video. Here we got Mexico and Canada, kind of give you an idea. Alaska should be bigger because it's bigger than Texas, but I drew Texas with a heart because I love Texas. So anyways, now where's the rest of these, where are these immigrants coming in from? And so here we have immigrants over here coming from West and Eastern Europe, okay? They are going to be migrating in, and they are going to be coming into this immigration center, which is Ellis Island. Ellis Island. And I want you to remember that Ellis starts with an E, and so does Europe. Europe starts with an E. And then we will have our Asian immigrants who are coming in through San Francisco area, and they will be coming in through Angel Island. And A for Angel, A for Asian, okay? Now, the reason that they're coming into these specific areas is because Europe is closer to New York and Asia is closer to California. So these are the immigration centers that they will be processed through. Angel Island being the worst of the two, what they had to experience. So if you ever have time, you want to look into it, go Google Angel Island and learn some of that history. But we're just doing the blanket surface level. What do you got to know? Okay, so yes, they're coming in here. This is also where we're going to get our Irish immigrants, who will be really based mostly in New York. This is a great great topic right here because it leads us into our political machines, who really take use of the fact that these guys are discriminated against. And remember last video, it's because they are Catholic, okay? And so they'll have a hard time finding jobs and stuff. Political machines are going to help them get jobs in exchange for votes. So we'll talk more about that. But there's Promontory, Utah. We talked about the Transcontinental Railroad. That's where that is. That section right here is kind of where Utah is, okay? So here's the setup, and we've got everybody moving around. What issues are immigrants dealing with? So that's what we're going to talk about now. All right, here we go. This looks like a lot of information, but it's really not. So we're just going to run through it real quick, top to bottom. You'll see how these arrows, we're going to be following the arrows when we hit each one. But before we start, I just kind of want to get into right here. Okay, so going in to the Gilded Age, we know that we have the Bill of Rights, which is the 1st through 10th Amendment. But we also, going forward, are down to here, the 15th Amendment. And this is what we call 13th through 15th Amendment are the Reconstruction Amendments. Now, the best way to remember what they stand for is free citizens vote. The 13th Amendment grants freedom to slaves. The 14th Amendment grants citizenship to slaves, to former slaves. And then the 15th Amendment grants voting rights to all men 21 and up. So that's what the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment stand for. Of course, the 14th Amendment goes further, and it stands for equal protection, so for citizens. So the Citizenship Amendment also that grants citizenship to former slaves also guarantees equal protection under these amendments. So we'll talk about that later, especially when we get into World War II. But I really wanted you to start with that basic understanding that the 14th Amendment is more than just citizenship. It goes further than that. So if you're a citizen of the United States, you're guaranteed equal protection. So under the law. So, but let's get into immigrants, and right here you can see and other groups. So right here, immigrants are going to be living in tenements, and we had talked kind of about that last video. So they're going to be living in tenements, and tenements lead to dirty cities, and that leads to our white wings. And I do have, let's see if I can pull up the image of our white wings. Let me see, is this it right here? Yes, okay. So if you see that right there, that is what the white wings were dressed as, and they'd be out there cleaning up the streets to get it ready for the day, and we'll get back into that same image in just a minute. So very straightforward. You got a lot of people living in an area in the city, and it's dirty. when immigrants came in, they were dealing with that one word I told you about in the last video. And I'm going to write it right here. You can't see that. Okay. Nativism. Okay. This is the word that says you don't belong here unless you were born here. I have more right to be here because I was born here. And of course, this little word right here is also going to be fueled by this word. Xenophobia. Xenophobia is the idea that you believe your culture is better than other cultures. So xenophobia is really what we're going to see when people are really focused on not wanting to allow Chinese immigrants in. That's really where xenophobia and nativism are going to work together. Xenophobia is also going to work real big with regard to the Native Americans, which we also talked about in the last video. But nativism is really, really by itself and large the issue that of immigration and people coming in, and where we see what we talked about yesterday also in that video, which was quotas, or the Quota Act, which is going to be the idea that people from certain areas can have more people coming in than another area. And the reason is over whether or not where they come from and how we view that area. So there are more people are allowed to come from Western Europe than they're allowed to come from Eastern Europe. And then we had the Chinese Exclusion Act, making it to where it was very difficult to come in if you were coming from Asia. And so a lot of nativism and xenophobia at work. But here, when we look at why are people living in terrible buildings and living, dirty stuff and getting sick because they're around it, and why are there no jobs for them? They came over because there was a ton of jobs. Why are there no jobs? Well, the idea here is nativism. People didn't want to hire them. Xenophobia, they didn't like them and their culture, and so they didn't want to give them a job. And so these people are going to come over expecting America to be the land of opportunities and amazing things, and find out that it's not necessarily the case. And so who's going to help them? Well, it's not going to be the government. It's going to be political machines, okay? So they're going to be they're not going to have jobs. And so political machines, specifically, we got his name right here, Boss Tweed, who is out of Tammany Hall, New York, is going to... and there's other bosses in other areas, but Boss Tweed is the main guy from Tammany Hall, and he's the one that's going to really take advantage of those Irish immigrants. And pretty much what he's going to say is, hey, you don't have a job, I'll get you a job, and right here, and I will get you a place to stay, and I'll make sure you have food and clothes and what you need if you vote for me. And this is what we call the spoil system, okay? Spoil system means you do something for me, then I will do something for you. So in this case, it is I give you job, a place to live and food and whatnot, then you vote for me and keep me in office, okay? Other forms of the spoil system would be I do something for you, then you get me a job in the government, whether I'm qualified or not, okay? That's another form of the spoil system. So generally, though, the jobs that you're going to get when you get a job through a political boss is going to be a job that has low pay, long working hours, and is under dangerous working conditions. And this is going to get people disgruntled because, again, this unchecked free enterprise market, the capitalism that is at play here, is not checked by the government. It is not regulated. So these company owners can do whatever they want. And so they're making people work for low pay, long hours, and dangerous working conditions. And so people can't get help from their government. They're going to end up forming unions and fighting for their rights, okay? And the first union that we're really going to see rise up, other than the farmers one that is the farmers one, is the Farmers Union. This is going to be your Populist Party. They are tired of having people overcharge them and making it very, very difficult I'm going to take this, oh, that does lead to unions, but the Populist Party is by itself, okay? So I'm going to just kind of put a note there, okay? The Populist Party is made up of farmers, okay? And so they're the first union that we really see come in, and probably the most successful. And they are going to fight for specific rights because they feel like they are struggling. They can't pay their bills. They're being overcharged to ship their goods, and everybody needs their goods. It's not like they are a group that doesn't, that's not like extremely important for the United States. They're very important for the United States, and so they're fighting. And they have some demands, and their demands will actually see some good change in the United States. For example, a graduated income tax, there's some debate on whether that's good or not, but this is going to help create the 16th Amendment, which is federal taxes, okay? Now, the 17th Amendment is something that they wanted, which was direct election of senators. Okay, so originally the senators were picked by their party, and so what you would get was this party favoring, and the spoil system would come from that. So if someone did something good for you, then you may give them a job in, let's say, as the police chief or the fire chief, or maybe even a senator position, okay? So we are getting irritated with that. We want people who are meant for this job. They know what they're doing. They are qualified to do the job. And so farmers are going to ask for the direct election of senators to try and help mitigate some of this issue. But we're going to see that we need to, and by mitigate, I mean help fix this issue. And so we are going to see that we're going to need to find other ways to start dealing with things like this and the spoil system in general. So the direct election of senators is going to kind of help that. And then they wanted a regulated railroad. Remember the railroads overcharging them? Hey, I know that this is a private business, government, but you need to get involved. This is getting out of hand, and you need food. And so the government, which we talked about yesterday, passes the Interstate Commerce Act, and they will start regulating the railroad. Now, we still have some issues here with the spoil system. Now, how do we start starting to fix this political machine issue where people are in office that shouldn't be, and I'm talking not people like the senators, but other things like congressmen and stuff like that, and people who are fire chiefs and police chiefs who are corrupted and shouldn't be in there. How do we fix this? Well, we are going to start trying to make changes, right? Start trying to create legislation that stops this. And President Garfield is going to be the spark that starts this. He is going to have somebody do something for him, and then that person is going to want a job. Tit for tat, right? I did for you, you do for me. But President Garfield is going to say no, and he is going to end up getting assassinated for it. Well, then that assassination, senators get scared. Not senators, I'm sorry. Representatives and people in the government start to get scared, and they're like, guys, we really have to do something about this because this scares us. What if someone wants a job and we don't give it to them and then they kill us, right? So we've got to do something. And then we will have the Pendleton Act passed, which makes it to where you have got to take a merit exam. You've got to be qualified for your position in order to get it. So a lot of good, and this is going to end up thwarting kind of this stuff up here. It's going to make it much more difficult for people to be participating in political machines because of all of these that are set into place. Now, we also have child labor. Children are working. Child labor is a huge thing. They will be working. People will take photos of them working and pull on the heartstrings of America. It's actually Heinz that takes those photos. And this is progressive era more that we're going into here. Child labor starts in Gilded Age. It gets kind of fixed in progressive era. Once Heinz takes the photos and people start to see what these children are dealing with, then legislation will be passed, and we'll see the first child labor laws take place, and this will decrease. We'll see a significant decrease in child workers after this. That's actually has been a test question. So, and then women's suffrage. This is where the first women wanting to vote. Suffrage means to vote. So this is the first movement that we're really going to see where women are starting to gather together and starting to fight for their right to vote. And it will continue on all the way until 1920. But this is kind of where we see all of that stuff start to come together. And we'll talk more about the women who are involved in this movement in the next unit, which is Progressive Era. Okay, so let's go through technology now. This was one of the other topics. And oh, you know what? Before I get into that, I just wanted to show you. This is Boss Tweed, by the way. This is how he's characterized in most of the test questions that you'll see, political cartoons and stuff like that. So if you see something like this, you know that that is Boss Tweed or a corrupted politician, a politician getting fat off of bribes, that kind of thing. And then this right here, those are tenants. This is kind of what it looks like. Very small room. It's hard to see here, but you can tell that this is a guy on a hammock and there's someone underneath him sleeping in that little wedge in the wall. And then there's two people here. They got clothes and everything everywhere. It's just a terrible place to live. It's not, it's just really, really conducive to disease and stuff like that. But let's get into technology now. So let me see. What is this one? This would be women voting. Of course, we'll see more into that. We talked about that already, and we talked about child labor. So, but just so in case you want to see, hold on, let me see. There we go. Children working during this time frame. You can look up Lewis Hine, I'm sorry, and there's a lot of great photos of what it looked like when children were working at this time. Okay, so here is one of our technologies that we already talked about last video. Sod homes, that's what they had to live in. Remember, there's no trees in those areas that they are trying to homestead, and so they will build into the ground to have more temperature controlled houses, but it will be made out of mud and grass and sticks and stuff like that. Steel plows for steel farming techniques, and then barbed wire to keep those cattle in place. Our other technology, of course, is the telephone by Alexander Graham. And then we've got Andrew Carnegie's Bessemer steel process. This is used to make refining steel faster, and it will be contributed to skyscraper buildings like the buildings in New York and stuff like that. State building, and it is because of the Bessemer steel process. Andrew Carnegie is a monopoly owner for U.S. Steel. And we have electricity, Thomas Edison. One of the really big things about this question that they often ask is, how does it help? Like, how does it lift, the economy? Or how does it make more money? Or how did it make working more efficient and things like that? And it's because by making it to where you have electricity, then you can now make light at night. So workers can work at night. So now you have a night shift. You're able to make more money as a business by forcing people to work at night. Okay, and that's it for technology. And the last thing we're going to get into is monopolies. Okay, so here are our monopoly owners. So what is a monopoly? A monopoly is pretty much somebody who owns the market for that area. So if I'm selling bikes, if I had a monopoly, I would own all the bike shops. Okay, so nobody else can sell them, only I can sell them. And if somebody else tries to sell them, I will buy them out, or I will sell my bikes for so much lower because I can afford to do that for a while. Because I have so much money that the little bike shop cannot afford to do that, and they will go out of business. These are tactics of monopoly owners, especially Rockefeller, who is known for his vertical alignment, which means he owned the whole process of the production of a specific thing. So if he is selling bikes, then he owns not only all the bike shops, but he owns the factories that make the bikes. He owns the rubber factory that makes the tires. He owns everything, okay? That's vertical alignment from the top down, everything that it takes to make the bike and then to sell it. So everything that it takes to make it all the way to sell it as far as the stores, he owns, okay? And then he is also known for horizontal alignment. I'm going to go ahead and write alignment because I didn't write it on the other one. And then horizontal alignment is, like I said before, the purchasing of all the other companies. So you are purchasing or low pricing. You're pricing out, making your prices lower so other people can't compete with you. All other companies in your field, okay? So if he's bicycles, he has not only bought all bicycle companies, but he has bought all ways to make the bicycle. So he owns everything to do with that particular thing. Although Rockefeller is not bicycles, he is oil, okay? And Andrew Carnegie, he is steel, U.S. Steel. Rockefeller is Stanford Oil, okay? And then these guys, though, even though they're doing all these bad things, like paying people very little wages and making it difficult for them to work and making them work in dangerous conditions where they're getting hurt and stuff like that, they're known as captains of the industry, which is a positive. So why are these guys known as a positive? And the reason for that is their philanthropy. Philanthropy is the concept of giving money to other people within your community to help your community. So what are you giving money for? Often, especially for Carnegie, he's the one that's mostly known for philanthropy because he believed, he had an intrinsic, deep belief that this was what you were supposed to do if you had money. You were supposed to be responsible with it and use it to better the society in which you lived. And he talks about that in his book, The Gospel of Wealth. But here we are with philanthropy. What do? He would build libraries, schools, and hospitals. Okay? So this is what he was known for. These are why they're captains of the industry. People were willing to ignore all of the things that they did that were wrong because of the things that they did that were right. Okay, J.P. Morgan, he is a robber baron. These are people who did not participate in philanthropy. They did the same tactics about, monopolizing the industry and mistreating the employees and stuff like that. But Morgan is a banker and he is an investor. So he'll invest in other people's companies and stuff like that. Cornelius Vanderbilt, he was the railroad tycoon, okay? He is the one that those farmers are trying to go after with the Populist Party to get the government involved to take care of some things, okay? So the idea here is free enterprise. Government regulations within the free enterprise system, and the reason is because the system is unchecked, okay? So the government doesn't get involved, and the reason for this is something that Alexis de Tocqueville right here coined as laissez-faire, okay? He is a Frenchman who comes to the United States, and he wants to know what makes America different from everywhere else, and he terms 5 values, okay? 5 values of the U.S. Governmental system, and it is going to be laissez-faire. And anytime you see laissez-faire, I want you to connect it with the word economics or economy. This is the idea of hands-off government, especially with regard to private business. The government does not get involved, okay? We will see this idea of laissez-faire change as we go along, and you will see the role of the government change with regard to this as we get further in, especially in progressive era. laissez-faire is something that we will talk about throughout the unit, and I'm going to lay these out for you now, but as we continue through each unit's video, you will see that these are clearly kind of embedded, and they keep popping up as things that we'll be dealing with throughout the year. Now, populism is the idea that the common man is involved in politics. So in most countries, it was only the elite that were involved, but here in the United States, there's ways to get involved in the government from the bottom up. In today's world, we really only see people who go to like elite colleges become president and stuff like that, although we do have a few that did not. But for the most part, that is the case. But that doesn't mean that we can't be involved in our government. We have the right to protest. We have the right to vote. We have the right to volunteer for campaigns. We can run for office if we want. So there are things that we can do for the common man to get involved. And populism pops up every time that we deal with civic participation in whatever form it is, which we talk about throughout the whole year. Egalitarianism is the idea of equality. Now, Alexis de Tocqueville actually says that he believes, now we've got liberty over here, right? The ability to do what you want, to be able to do what you want, you know, within the spectrum of social contract theory, which is the idea that by entering into society, you agree to give up some of your rights in order to protect the rights of everybody as a whole. So you agree to stop at red lights, otherwise you get a ticket for disobeying the law, because you know that stopping at red lights is a safety thing for everybody. So this is the idea that you no longer have the right to the liberty to just run a red light. It's illegal now. Okay, and that's part of that social contract theory. But Alexis de Tocqueville believed that eventually your freedoms within the liberty would be squashed by America's push for equality and egalitarianism. So very, very interesting stuff. And lastly, individualism is the idea that you don't need the government for help. You do for yourself. This is kind of the idea that we are not a collective society, as in we don't everybody work and then compile into a pot and then redistribute. It's the idea of individualism, that you do for yourself, that you're expected to take care of yourself and things like that. Eventually this will change, especially when we get into the Great Depression. This idea definitely changes here, and there's a huge debate on it between President Hoover and FDR, but we will get into that later. So the role of the government eventually does change, because we cannot be having people mistreat their employees. There will be riots that come into play, and the government will in some cases try and take the side of the business to try and keep things running smoothly in the economy, but they are going to realize that there does need to be some regulations. And of course, they've already instituted the Interstate Commerce Act, which does regulate private business, now the railroad to a certain extent, and we will see this continue throughout the year in different ways. But as far as free enterprise and monopolies, this is going to change, and it's going to change with the Sherman Anti-Trust Act. This is going to be the idea that not only are monopolies illegal, but trusts are also illegal. And so it's the government trying to get involved and say, we can't have this anymore, because what it does is it squashes competition. If you only have one company selling things, then what you get is one company able to sell a product for whatever they want. So if you only have one company buying out all of the ways to make milk, so they have a cow farm and they're buying it out and they won't let anyone else make milk, then they can technically charge whatever they want for milk, because they're the only place that you can get it, and they have you kind of stuck. You have to pay their prices. But if there's lots of people selling milk, then the price is lower, because now you have lots of places to choose from, and price is something you consider when you buy. So all the companies selling it will consider what price is the going rate for milk and how much they should sell it for, and compared to their competitors. So monopolies squash this competition and make it very, very difficult for there to be a growing economy. And so the government will eventually get involved and take care of that. So we are done now with Gilded Age. We will move into your next unit in the next video, which is the progressive era. We are going to be progressive about making change, okay, and fixing all of these bad issues. So I will talk to y'all next time, and hopefully we get to really understanding some things that maybe we didn't get it the first time. Talk to y'all later.